For us, we are a filmmaking company. We make different kind of films, but very rarely some subjects come to us where we take the opportunity not only for making a film, but to be a part of the history or to show our respect to that part of the history uh, for the years to come. In our mind, Partition 1947 by Gurinder is that kind of event. So filmmakers, companies across the globe like Pathé, Reliance Entertainment, BBC, Ingenious, BFI, all of them joined hands together to make this historic film. And I think probably I'm not the correct person to talk about the film or talk about this journey. Uh, the person who have worked on it, researched on it, spends years, given her own own facts and own knowledge and own historical parts. Uh, I'll take this opportunity and request Gurinder Chadha, who is among us this evening. Please come here, and she will be the best person to share
Super.
her
Thank you
thoughts.
so much, Mr. Sarkar. Welcome, Gurinder.
Thank you, Shivashish.
That was a wow trailer that we just saw.
It was wow for me to see it in Hindi. That was very wow. I loved it. Loved it.
We also loved it, right? We did, right? We all loved it. There's this thing that I'd like to ask you. इससे पहले कि हम आगे बढ़ें, मुझे please बताएं. Whenever you've made a film, you know, there has been a social message in it with a quirk. हमेशा कुछ रहता है वो एक. लेकिन with this kind of subject, कितना reservation था कि यार, how do I deal with this? Was there any kind of reservation that you had?
Well, all the films I make in some way are about me and autobiographical and about my own story. And this film is also very personal. My ancestors are from Punjab now, which is Pakistan, that part. So growing up in England, I didn't have an ancestral homeland to call my own. So the shadow of partition has been with me throughout my whole life. So for me, this is a personal film, but it also does have a quirk, because what I realized in doing the research was that the history that I had been taught about why partition happened was totally a lie, complete lie. We have been told that partition happened as a reaction to us fighting with each other, whereas my research shows that partition was definitely a political act. It Jan Bujke hua tha, for certain interests.
I'm sure, as I also said earlier, कि this is based on true events.
Yes.
There are 2 books जिसको adapt किया गया है. Please
जी.
tell us something about those books.
So the first book we optioned was Freedom at Midnight, which is the sort of, people talk about as the seminal book on partition, written by Larry Collins and Dominic Lapierre. And for many years, this was my father's favorite book. It's still on the shelf, dog-eaten, you know. And it was based on lots of long interviews with Mountbatten himself. So it's quite biased, you know, in that way. But I had optioned that book. I had started wanting to make this film because I went to Pakistan. What happened was in 2008, I did a BBC documentary which was looking at my roots. And we started in England, went to Kenya, where I was born, came to India, went to Hardwar, found out where my ancestral village was, and then went to Pakistan. And in the documentary, I say, okay, I'm here, but I'm not going to call this country Pakistan. I'm going to call it pre-partitioned India, because that's what it means to me. And you see it in the documentary, it's on YouTube. But when I got to the town, all these people came out and they threw flowers at me and they gave me a shawl and they said, Aap hamari beti hai, ji aaya nu. And they said, this is your home. We're so happy you've come. So it was a very moving experience for me. And I found my grandfather's house, and there were many refugees there from India to there. So it was at that point I felt I wanted to do something about the people's partition. So that was the beginning of the film. But then, once we had started doing our research, I was at a reception with Prince Charles, and I told Prince Charles, I'm making a film about your favorite uncle. And he was very excited. And he said, what are you basing it on? And I said, Freedom at Midnight. And he said, no, you need to read some other books. And he said, please get Narinder Singh Sarila's book, which I hadn't heard of, went to 5 bookshops, found it, was mind-blowing. And of course, Narinder Singh Srila was a diplomat, an Indian government official. He was High Commissioner to Paris for 20 years. He was ADC to Mountbatten in Rashtrapati Bhavan, in 1948. And he had been in the British Library in London in 1997, and he was sitting there writing a book about the Maharajas of India when an Indian lady, Mrs. Ghosh, who was a librarian, was given these papers, top secret documents, and was told to index them. And she saw the papers, read the significance. She went to Narendra, said, "Sir, I think you should look at these papers." He ditched the book he was writing and wrote Shadow of the Great Game. So his Indian intervention against all the odds in the British Library, where these documents were then uncovered. And so we took that and turned it into the movie.
Wow, that's so much to learn from. And कितना सुन के एकदम ऐसा लग रहा है, हाँ यार, as if you it's a storytelling session जहाँ आप हमको कहीं और ले गए. With you.
Sorry, मैंने हिंदी में नहीं बोला.
नहीं, बिल्कुल अच्छा किया आपने जैसे बोला, हमें बहुत अच्छा लगा.
मगर जब मैं हिंदी में बोलूँगी आपको कोई समझ नहीं आना था जो कुछ मैं बोल रही हूँ.
जितना आपने जैसे बोला. So what we'll do is, a director's vision, जिसको उतारा है बहुत ही खूबी के साथ इस पर्दे पे एक्टर्स ने, उनमें से एक दो वेरी गॉर्जियस हुमा कुरैशी इज हियर. उनके लिए जोरदार तालियां हो जाएं प्लीज. ये जोरदार कहते हैं आप लोग. जी.
Thank you.
हुमा ने बहुत साथ दिया हमको पिक्चर में. She was amazing, and I didn't know Huma, and I came to India and auditioned several actresses, but Huma just jumped out at me. I have to say, in the same way that Keira Knightley did for Bend It Like Beckham. I didn't know Keira Knightley either, but Huma had that very natural quality, very feisty, and plus she looked very hutkuti Punjabi, I liked that. And I'm so pleased because all during the shooting, she would question me a lot, and I liked that. Maybe not at the time, but
Definitely not at the time.
but she really, her contribution was fantastic.
I like the way she's listening to this. She's like, what is Gurinder about to say about me?
Yeah, she's a tricky one. You never know what she's gonna say. So I have to keep telling her, you can't say this.
Right. You can say a lot of things जो कि हम सुनना चाहते हैं यहाँ पे about your role, the preparations. लेकिन उस सबसे पहले, Partition 1947. How do you relate to this subject?
Well, I think as Indians growing up in India, everyone relates to the partition. We all have, our parents or grandparents have experienced something. तो partition जैसी word आप सुनते हो, कहीं ना कहीं एक emotional connection तो आ ही जाता है. और मेरी family का भी है. Thankfully painful नहीं है क्योंकि कोई भी किसी की भी loss of life नहीं था. But घर छोड़ना या अपने घर वालों या loved ones के बारे में चिंता करना कि वो safe हैं, घर वापस आएंगे या नहीं, it's not a good feeling. And the fact that so many people were forced to leave their homes, they didn't want to. And that choice should not be given to any human being. किसी भी इंसान को force किया जाए कि अपना घर छोड़ के चला जाए for a political reason, I think it's not right. And what I loved about this script when I read it, it's such a, of course there's the politics and there's all the research that Gurinder and her husband Paul have put in the film. But it's so human. And it talks about something very simple. About humanity, about love, and that's what I loved about the film. And all the characters are flawed, they're passionate, they have ambitions, they have hopes, they have dreams, and you sort of go like कि आज के दुनिया में भी हम देखें तो ये आज भी हो रहा है ना, तो हमने क्या 70 years से कुछ सीखा है, मतलब जो हम क्या वो same mistakes बार-बार ही करते रहेंगे. So I think in a small way, it's all of us have tried to say that.
It's a
Very well said.
It's a very contemporary film, even though it is set 70 years ago. जब हम शुरू किया था फिल्म लिखने के लिए, Obama was president, सीरिया में कोई जंग नहीं था, और यूरोप में ब्रेक्सिट भी नहीं था. कौन सोच सकता था जब ट्रम्प president बनेगा? Who would have thought of Brexit? Nobody would have thought of these things when we started making the film. So during the course of the film, the world went ulta-pulta, basically. And I think that now when I was in Australia last month, and we released the film there. People really loved the film in Australia because they felt it was very modern. And also in Australia, they have their own border policies, their own divisions, you know. So I think the film is a very Indian story in its heart, but actually it's a very global story because partition, refugees, this is the state of our world today. Politicians will always try and divide us because it's easier to rule us if we're divided.
Right. Australia को छोड़ते हैं, हमारे देश में भी I'm sure ये बहुत धमाका मचाएगी film. The name is Partition 1947. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's over to you. आप लोग के जो भी सवाल हैं आप पूछ सकते हैं. But before that, we'll have a quick photo op. So I'll take the mics. है ना? Yeah, I'll just take. जी. We have another photo op. Thank you so much. Now, yeah, we will do that. We'll have another photo, but we'll just have the question answer round. Yeah. It's over to you. You please be seated. No, please. Please have a seat. Come on, please have a seat.
No, we're good actually. Standing
You good?
We're
Yeah.
fine.
Cool. We'll take the chairs out. Ji. Gurinder, this is for you.
Always.
हुमा जी
जी.
ऑन योर राइट हाय हुमा
Hi.
जी जैसा कि हम सभी ने देखा कि इस ट्रेलर में हमने देखा और इस फिल्म में ओमपुरी जी भी हैं लेकिन अब वो हमारे बीच में नहीं है तो आई थिंक वो आपके डैडी बने हैं इस फिल्म में करेक्ट तो कैसा रहा उनके साथ का एक्सपीरियंस अगर आप कुछ शेयर करना चाहें क्योंकि ये उनकी वन ऑफ द लास्ट फिल्म थी तो अगर आप कुछ बता पाएं
जी बिल्कुल बिल्कुल उनकी आखिरी फिल्म में से एक है और ओम जी मेरे अब्बा प्ले कर रहे हैं फिल्म में एंड आई थैंक गुरिंदर कि उन्होंने इतने प्यारे अब्बा दिए मुझे बिकॉज फ्रॉम द फर्स्ट मोमेंट दैट आई मेट हिम he was just such a lovely person to be with. Of course, he's a very, very fine actor, whether it's been in India or in the West. And we all will fondly remember his huge body of work. But I think वो इंसान बहुत बढ़िया थे. At least he was very warm and loving with me. And he used to call me Beti also. He came to my house, in fact, last year, almost this time, you know, Eid ke time pe. And my parents met him. And it was so lovely to have him over. And I think it's a great loss. And I feel my scenes with him in the film are some of my favorite scenes, especially the one in the back of the car. where हम एक सीन कर रहे थे जब मुझे लगा और गुरिंदर को भी लगा कि हाँ अच्छा टेक है and he was just sitting next to me. He didn't even have lines and he said एक और करते हैं मेरे लिए and both of us went like but ये तो अच्छा shot था and we did another take and when you see the film you'll realize it's come out so beautiful and so emotional and I think only an actor who's worked so much in theatre, in film, in different languages has that kind of experience to really, I guess, tell, you know, when you really hit the spot.
I think for Omji, when I gave him the script, he was very happy because obviously being Punjabi, he was happy that I was Punjabi and a woman and taking this subject, which he was very dear to his heart. But even though it was a serious film, the abiding memory of Omji was that he was a complete and utter joker on set. He was in the scene with Hansraj Hansji, and his character is blind and old and has to sit still. But whenever the music started, he wanted to get up and jump up and sing and dance. And we had to keep stopping him because he kept getting into shot while he was dancing. But also, there were many extras in that scene. And he loved to joke with them. And there was one poor fellow who was an extra, but we'd given him a line. And he was supposed to go and hand him a plate of pakoras. And this poor fellow was very nervous. Anyway, Omji is blind in the film, and he would walk up to him in this one take, and he gave him the pakoras and went, Abba, pakode! And Ompuri said, no, definitely you.
मैं अंधा हूँ बहरा नहीं हूँ.
That's it. And that was in the middle of a take, so we had to cut. But the thing about Ompuri was that he lived life to the full, you know. He enjoyed himself. off camera, he was doing his little business with, you know, a few tipples here and there, but enjoying himself as he was shooting. And I think he couldn't wait to see the film. I know I had exchanged some comments with him. So my only sad thing is that he's not here to see the film. But every day on the set, he would always come up to me and say, "Bibi ji, tu bahut acha kaam kar rahi hai. Kari ja, kari ja." Yeah.
Gurinder ma'am, hi. Hi, I'm Hoshan Katrak from Parsi Times. Chadha ji, आपके लिए एक question है.
Ji.
When we talk of independence, one of the first films which come to mind is Gandhi. It's been almost 35 years since the film was released. What parallels would you draw between the two films?
Well, I think the biggest parallel is the subject time, you know, 1947, and the fact that that was also made by a British director. And I think Gandhi was a seminal film in its time because it was huge and sweeping. And I think Richard Attenborough had spent a lot of time, 9 years, I think, trying to make that film. And it was very much depicted history as he had seen it at that time. Where the films differ is that my version tells a different version of history of the British Empire in India in the last days of the Raj compared to Gandhi. And I think that I really wish Richard Attenborough had been around today because I think he would really enjoy this take. And I think what's been very interesting in Britain is that the majority of Britishers have actually taken all this on the chin. I mean, you know, Churchill is a hero for many in Britain, but he's also not a hero for many in Britain and out of Britain. So the film challenges you in one of the biggest Britishers, heroes of Britain, and his deeds, because of course a lot of what the British did, they did in their own interest, not in the interest of India. And in the end of, you know, I think Gandhi does not challenge that, whereas Partition 1947 absolutely challenges the role of empire, the last days of empire, and the legacy of the British that was left in India.
Gurinder ma'am.
Ji, because so I am a very unusual film director working today. I'm British and I'm also Indian. I'm Punjabi and I'm also a mother. You know, these four things are very unusual. In fact, I can't think of anyone else who has that position. Unique combination. This film is made definitely by somebody who is both British and Indian and a woman and a mother. Because mothers, we don't get to make films about great tragedies, you know, with lots of violence and turbulence. You know, mothers don't get to do that. So for us, when our children misbehave and fight, what we have to do is give them a moral guidance. We have to say, "Bache, acha chalo ho gaya, you go apologize, don't let this happen again." So as mothers, you know, our approach to life and humanity is to make things better, is to heal wounds, you know, instruct our children to reach a higher moral place. So in that sense, if I was going to make a film about partition 70 years later, it was very important for me that I did something that took us to a different level. In terms of the change, you know, being this unique combination means I have to appeal to people in Britain, Goras, you know, middle class, upper class Goras like the Mountbattens, as well as working class, you know, Australians, Americans, you know, people all over the globe, as well as Indians, you know. And I try and do that as best as I can. I mean, I have the one statistic that no one else has. I made a film that was #1 in India and England at the same time, and that was Bride and Prejudice. And that's no one else has done that yet. So I think that what I'm learning more and more is that there are certain things that appeal to an Indian audience and appeal to the Indian side of me, just as there are to the English side of me. So Partition 1947 is a great title for the film, and in fact that was the working title of the film for many years. All the early scripts are called Partition. It was in England that they thought Viceroy's House was a better title.
But for India, Partition 1947 is a better title than Viceroy's House. It has a better
Much
connect.
better.
Yeah.
And even the trailer, for me, gets to the point, In the
That's Indians, no?
It's
We just get to the
Indians.
point.
I mean, the English trailer is great because गोरे को भी खुश करना चाहिए था ना हमको. So, we kind of, we showed it like a great sumptuous British period drama, which I wanted to make. I wanted to make a film like they make in Britain. I just wanted to have the people who are normally, the Indians who are normally extras and on the side be center stage. So for Britain, it was a subversive film because all these extras, these knockers, they took the emotion of the film in the end, not the Mountbattens. Whereas in India, I think we've gone for the real reason why I made the film, which was the politics. The reason why my grandparents suffered at that time and why I don't have a homeland, an ancestral homeland to call my own. That was the real reason for me to make the film. And I think the Indian trailer that Reliance have put together absolutely hits the nail on the head.
Hi, Huma. Congratulations for the trailer. How was it working with Gurinder and also the trailer that went on Berlin Film Festival?
The trailer that went on?
Berlin Film Festival.
Right. Well, tough. Gurinder is a very tough director. She's a lovely director, but a very tough director. If she is not happy with what you're doing, she will keep working till she gets what she wants. And I think that's brilliant because this is not an easy film to make. जब मैंने ये script पढ़ी तो मुझे लगा it's a very unusual Gurinder Chadha film. We associate her with Pride and Prejudice, with Ben Like Beckham. These are very like diaspora, slice of life problem films. I mean, but this was a much bigger film. So for me, it was interesting because, and also what she said, her origin is so unique as a British and a Punjabi filmmaker that she's a very interesting person to make a film like this. And in her films, women always have a very strong voice. Like her female characters are very well etched out. So I was very excited to, of course, work with her. But she's a force of nature. She's excited about the film that she does. A film is like her baby, so how she would scold her children and make sure they do the right thing. I think she treated all her actors like that, and it was great. It was a great collaboration. It was fun working with her, and she's also great fun. But that's always when we're not shooting. And it was a very difficult film to make for all of us. It was hot. It was dusty. हमने जोधपुर और जोधपुर के बाहर आउटस्कर्ट्स में शूटिंग की थी अगस्त सितंबर में गर्मी में मतलब जैसे जल के काले हो गए थे हम लोग but I think it was worth it because we all knew we were making and being a part of something really, really special. So I think it's a very brave film for her to do. And like she said, it's a very timely film for her to pick because she could have done actually any other film, but to do a film like this as a woman, I think it's not easy. And hats off.
Thank you.
Hats off.
Thank you.
Ma'am, hi. मेरा नाम hello ma'am. या मैम मेरा सवाल आपसे है गुरिंदर मैम से कि मैम लेडी माउंटबेटन का कितना रोल था पार्टीशन में अगर आप कुछ बता पाएं क्योंकि रिसर्च आपने बहुत
मैं ये दिखाना चाहती हूँ जो कुछ असलियत था and Lady Mountbatten she was much more politically astute than her husband. Her husband was very much into his clothes, his badges, his medals, the pomp and splendor of his class, being part of the royal family. He was a very vain man, and I wanted to show that. That was part of his thing. He was more excited about introducing the zipper, to India, and whereas she was his conscience. She constantly was saying to him, don't rush what you're doing, wait, don't just go for partition, wait. So I think that also there's a lot of footage of Edwina out in India. He remained a lot, in Viceroy's house in Rashtrapati Bhavan, meeting, Nehruji, Gandhiji, everybody. But Edwina, she was out with the Red Cross. She was a patron of the Red Cross. She would go and visit villages. She would go to Gandhi's prayer meetings. She was out and about in India, and she actually really did want to make changes here. She took that role very seriously. So I wanted to show that, and all the footage is there on YouTube to see her out there with refugees, with people, just not really able to do anything, but just to show that hamdardi, she very much wanted to do that, and I salute her for doing that actually. But I think that her husband really didn't really listen to her, and he just sort of went down a different path.
मैम दूसरा
मुझको ये अफसोस है जे वो उस टाइम में अभी वो टॉप सीक्रेट डॉक्यूमेंट्स मैंने देखे हैं ब्रिटिश लाइब्रेरी में अभी है, कोई भी देख सकता है, जे नेहरू जी और गांधी जी और पटेल जी वो लोग जो उन्होंने वो डॉक्यूमेंट्स देखे थे ना उस वक्त में, मुझको लगता है हिंदुस्तान का अलग हिस्ट्री होनी चाहिए थी, because I think they was so, after 300 years of British rule, they were very much concerned with India and India's independence. Quite rightly, they had fought very hard, a terrible struggle against British oppression for independence. And so they were just thinking about these borders and India, whereas Britain was used to ruling the world, was thinking about a bigger global scenario. If India becomes independent, what's going to happen to our place in the rest of the world? So I think afsoos ki baat hai that I think the Indian leaders never really thought about the global situation, just about Hindustan. And I think these top secret documents show that what the British agenda was, and that the Indian leaders didn't realize how cunning they were in pushing the Indian politicians into one direction, whereas they had a completely different agenda.
तफसील में बताऊं तो मैं उस वक्त मैंने स्क्रिप्ट पढ़ी थी और एक ऑडिशन टेप भेजा था गुरिंदर को हिंदुस्तान से। सहर लतीफ़ कास्टिंग डायरेक्टर हैं, उनने मुझे कॉल किया, बोला फिल्म बन रही है, मेरे घर आई, हमने एक ऑडिशन टेप रिकॉर्ड किया जहाँ मैं कुछ दुपट्टा सुखा रही हूँ, एंड आई सेंड टू गुरिंदर, एंड आई थिंक गुरिंदर रियली लाइक्ड इट, एंड तब कोइंसिडेंटली मैं उसके कुछ टाइम बाद आई वाज इन इंग्लैंड व्हेन आई गॉट अ कॉल सेइंग गुरिंदर वांट्स टू टेस्ट यू विथ मनीष दयाल, द एक्टर हु इज इन द फिल्म विथ मी ऑपोजिट मी, who's a wonderful actor. But so I said, मैं तो मगर हिंदुस्तान में हूँ ही नहीं, मैं तो इंग्लैंड में हूँ. तो then she got us in touch, and then I went to see her musical, and then we did like a reading together with Manish, another actor from the film Jazz and I, which I think went well.
Very well.
And then she called me one day, I was sleeping, and she called and saying, okay, I want you to be my Alia. And I think I screamed for 5 minutes, and she's like, she laughed. She said, okay, maybe it's the wrong decision. But no.
But also, she has a period face, period features. In the film, she has a 40s hairstyle and wears those big salwars and kuli kameez, and so she really suits the period look. That's important to say.
And it's a lovely script, like I said. It's each character is so beautifully written. हिस्ट्री को बहुत ही अलग तरीके से लिखा गया. हम भी जब हिंदुस्तान में पार्टीशन के ऊपर फिल्म बनाते हैं तो बहुत अलग तरीके से बनाते हैं. इनका नज़रिया बनाने का बहुत अलग है. ऑफ कोर्स एक जो सीक्रेट डॉक्यूमेंट्स की बात कर रही हैं वो तो है ही, मतलब दैट्स द बेसिक क्रक्स ऑफ द फिल्म. बट उसके अलावा पार्टीशन को एक पीपल्स प्रॉब्लम बताया गया है. बहुत आसान होता है कि आप फिंगर पॉइंट करो और किसी को ब्लेम करो, बट टू रियली थिंक दैट इट्स अ कलेक्टिव प्रॉब्लम and how that an issue like this affects common people, I think वो कहीं ना कहीं निकल के आ रहा था, which I sort of, as a person also, I sort of resonate with that whatever could be your ulterior motive, it could be geopolitical, it could be anything, but to divide people, and to cause unrest or bloodshed is just not right. So I just love that, and I knew when I read the film that I would love to be a part of a film like this. About Alia, well, Alia is a Muslim interpreter to the Mountbattens. Have come. She's educated. She's Muslim, which is very unusual for a girl for that period. Very strong. Her problem is sort of the problem that India had, or a lot of Muslims in India had that point in time, whether to stay or to leave. And she's in love with this boy who's Hindu, and she has a blind father to take care of. And the father's found this lovely young Muslim boy for her, played by the lovely dashing Arunodaya Singh, who's a great guy, but she's just not in love with him, and she has to make that choice whether to stay or to leave.
But we also made it that Alia and Jeet. One was from Amritsar, one was from Lahore. So they never knew which country they were going to end up in until the last minute. So that was
which is the problem of all Indians. No, you could be in Lahore, but you could be a Hindu, and then you didn't know which side you want to be on because Lahore was still your city, and so it was just that conflict that people had at a point in time. You know, who you really are. That question of identity when something like this is thrown in your face. I guess people just respond.
When we were making the film, when we were shooting the refugee scenes, we had many extras who had come because actually in Jodhpur we're not too far from the border, right? So we had a lot of people who were coming as extras, and there are scenes with Mountbatten in the camp where there are real refugees, and he's talking to them just while the camera's on, and they start telling him about their real experiences, what happened to them, how they escaped with their lives because their Muslim neighbors put burqas on them, got them on the railway, got them across the border. And so all this started happening for real on the film. But also, when we were shooting those refugee scenes, it was terribly upsetting because we had 1,000 extras, and every day we were dressing them to look like period, 1947 refugees. But on our phones, we were seeing the news, which was the main news at that time was the little Syrian boy who was found washed up on the beach as his family were trying to escape Syria. So we were looking at refugees on our phone on the news, and we were shooting period refugees here, and it really made the film feel very urgent. I think that I was going to say something else. I forgot now. There's a lady here.
Yeah, hi. Hi, Uma. So basically my question is, this is more like a Indo-British film, you have started doing that. So can we expect you to also join, the Hollywood League and, sign some movies out there?
Well, I've never chased Hollywood or a particular industry. I think wherever I chase creativity, I chase good scripts. I'm doing a Tamil film as we speak right now. So for me, language is not really the concern. I mean, I don't choose scripts based on what language or what territory is going to release in. I think, if Gurinder had made this film in Punjabi, I would still love to be a part of it. So yeah, if there's a good script, no matter which part of the world it is in, I would be up for it, most definitely.
Just one added thing. You are also a part of, doing the Rajnikant film. If you could just tell us what's your role and, how
I think let's keep it to Partition 1947. Okay. We'll do another press conference for that.
Gurinder, I have a question for you.
Just this lady here, then you. Well, I think all filmmaking is a risk. Anyone who's trying to say something different, it's always a risk as a filmmaker, but you have to follow your heart and you have to say what you think. That's what artists do. I want to tell you that my editor in England, Valeria, he was Italian. And when we were cutting the film, every cut, when we screened it for the producers, he would always cry at the end, as an Italian. He was very emotional. And he would always cry. And whenever I wanted to keep something in that I knew would be more appealing to the Indian side of me, he was my biggest defender against people who would say, oh, no, it's too emotional, it's too emotional. And I said, no, I want this sequence, I want to do this one. So Valeria was there with me throughout that. But then, when we were halfway through editing, Brexit happened. And suddenly, he became a refugee because he didn't know if he was going to stay in England, or he had English wife, 2 children. He didn't know if he had to stay or go to Italy. At the same time, we saw a rise in hate crime. Suddenly immigrants were being blamed for problems, because of the rise of the right. You had the rise of the right in Le Pen, in France, in Germany, It was a very tricky time when we were editing the film. So I think that this rise of the right, wherever you are, ultimately, one has to stand up for what is right. Now, this is a nation that is built on the philosophies of Gandhiji, and when I watched the film back, the first time I watched the finished film back, I sat in the cinema, in the screening room, And I turned to Paul, my husband, and I said, you know what? There's two people from the past who I think would really appreciate the film. And one is Gandhi ji. You know, it's his philosophy, the film. And the second one is Guru Nanak Dev Ji, you know, who says, before you see yourself as a Hindu or a Sikh or a Muslim, see yourself as a human. So for me, that wherever I went, these two, Gandhi ji and Guru Nanak Dev Ji, are with me. They're on either side of me. And I think that is the reason why I was able to make the film, because I kept going back to them.
Hi, Gurinder, I have a question for you. Yeah, just wanted to know, ma'am, how different is the Hindi cut from the film's original British release?
Same, exactly the same. Exactly the same.
This is asking you, so considering, you know, there's some amount of criticism as far as the Viceroy House is concerned. Some said that it totally disregards the freedom struggle in India. Some said that it was anti-Muslim. And there's some amount of brickbats. Now that it's releasing for the Indian audience, what sort of response do you want from this film?
Well, I think that you cannot make a film like this without upsetting people. I mean, because everybody has their own version of history, you know. As the film says, it opens with history as written by the victors. You know, this film would be very different if it was made by a Pakistani in Pakistan, an Indian from India, or a white British person in Britain. But it's the unique combination of who I am that has made it my vision. So people who will have something to say, it's because they want their own version of history. You know, they want to see things their way, and that's perfectly valid. You know, I am really not worried about people wanting to see more of this or more of that or more of, you know, this side, you know, more of Jinnah or more of Nehruji or more of this. I'm happy with that, because the thing is, this is everybody's story, and everybody has to tell their own stories. And this is not going to be the last film on Partition. There'll be many more. But this is my version, and this is how I see the world, and this is my record of how I see the events that defined me, my family, my community, and my nations, you know, all my nations at that time in 1947. So I absolutely appreciate some people having their own comments, and they're 100% right, because it's an emotive subject. You know, I think for Pakistan, you know, it's going to be a very emotional subject. In England, what has been very interesting for me is to see the way British Pakistanis have seen the film, so, you know, compared to a few Pakistanis from Pakistan, because there was a Muslim writer in Britain who said that anybody attacking this film, yes, it was Fatima Bhutto, after her article came out, which was very much from a privileged Pakistani perspective, because for her, I think it's very hard to appreciate that her film, that her country was born out of such pain, basically. It's hard for people to understand that and appreciate that, because people want to rewrite history. But I appreciate her anger. I appreciate, you know, her position. It's hard for young countries to find their place in a global world, you know. But for me, I think that in Britain, what was great was a lot of British Pakistanis saw the film, came up to me, were very emotional, and said, we didn't know our history. We didn't know any of this, and thank you for telling us it. And so I think this is why sometimes it might be hard for people to understand, but being a British Asian, you know, I have close friends who are British Pakistani as well as Indian, as well as white, and we have a different cultural experience than, say, Indians and Pakistanis here on the subject. So I think I've been able to stand back, you know, and look at it in a different way, not necessarily the right way or the wrong way, but in a different way, and hopefully shine a light on what it means for me and my ancestors, and why my grandmother suffered, as I said, and why I lost my Puaji, who would have been 72 today, had she not died during that time.
Whom?
No, because what I tried to do was make a film that was very fair for everybody. You know, as I was cutting the film, I wanted to make sure that I was not going to offend, you know, people who were liberal-minded and were understanding of where I was coming from. You know, in many ways, you know, this is not a film for people who think from extreme sides, you know. It's how I think. It's my view of the world. It's who I am, you know. And therefore, it's a personal film on what I see as the future, you know. And for me, the future, okay, we have partition. Partition is there. There is another country called Pakistan. My homeland is there. My grandfather, my great-grandfather's house, everything is there. But for me, I value the music, you know. I value Punjabi music. I value Punjabi language. I value Punjabi culture, fashions, you know, all this. And to me, that's a unifying force. That's a positive thing of what I value about my ancestral sort of culture and legacy. If I can't go back to that village, I can appreciate the music and the poetry from that joint heritage.
Huma, yeah, Justin.
Yeah, we'll just take
Huma,
one
there was a shot in the trailer where one character comes to the other and says, "Aap hamare logo ke saath raha kijiye." Now this is of course pre-independent India, and we can imagine that sort of dialogue happening. But 7 decades later, here we still have this you versus me divide, where people are judged upon what their ideologies are and which meat they eat. How sad do you think the state is?
Sad, that we haven't really learned. I mean, it's really sad. It's baffling. I think people who talk like that need medical help. This is what my personal opinion is, because I don't think any god or any religion or any country or the idea of nationhood should divide. It should unify. And like what Gurinder said, you should look at the unifying forces like music and poetry and dance and culture and food. You know, I've grown up in a more secular way. I was raised a Muslim, but I've played Krishna at every Janmashtami, you know, in our school and our you know, colony skits and everything. We never कंजक पे हम लोग जाते थे, तो पाँव को ना धोते हैं, पूजा करते हैं, दिवाली मनाते हो, आप होली मनाते हो, ईद भी उतने मजे से मनाते हो. So I think आप जब when you can be together and have the best of all the worlds, why would you choose to take such an extreme point of view and miss out on all these beautiful experiences, all these lovely friends? Why would you choose to do that? So I think people who take such an extreme point of view in life have either ulterior motives or just need medical help.
Also, quick question to Mr. Sarkar. Are we looking at a Pakistan release? I mean, is it going to come out officially there?
So, it has been sent to censor. If the censor clears it, definitely will have a Pakistan release. Incidentally, it is having a Bangladesh release. It will be, because that's partition history was as much relevant on the western side as it was on the eastern side of the country. So Bangladesh, it is already cleared. Bangladesh, it will have a release probably on the same date. Pakistan, we are waiting for the censor. If the censor clears, it will have a release.
हुमा नॉर्मली यहाँ सामने आपके राइट में जी हुमा नॉर्मली आप बहुत काम रहती हैं और नॉर्मली आप कुछ बोलती नहीं है मीडिया को, लेकिन हाल ही में ईद पार्टी के टाइम पर आपका कुछ पेपराजी जो नीचे शूट कर रहे थे
नहीं,
आपका
ऐसा कुछ भी नहीं हुआ था.
ऐसी न्यूज़ आई थी, तो क्या
I have no idea, ma'am.
Can I introduce the rest of the cast,
please do that. Yeah, I was about
I'd
to do
like
that.
to introduce on stage Denzel Smith.
Who's playing Muhammad Ali Jinnah?
Muhammad Ali Jinnah.
तो इनकी शक्ल ध्यान से देख लीजिए.
Arona Singh, who plays
Asif.
Asif Ali Beg plays our wonderful sous chef.
Yeah.
This is part of the wonderful cast, very small faction, of course, and they're very, very talented, lovely.
Thank you so much. We'll just have a couple of solo pictures. Yeah? Huma? Chal. We good? I'll take it. We'll just have a couple of solo pictures. Yeah? So, Huma? Gurinder, आप भी आ जाओ. अरुण, आप भी.